him in the thousands to see the boys become champions. Oh, 67, and then he's a Westman. The first game in the thousands to see the boys become champions. Cheers. Cheers. This next song's about a daily record in the sun. Shite. Thugs and thieves. Sorry, it's no, it's a song called Maggie Thatcher. Boo! Ice cream and jelly.
Hello. Hello. Hi. Hi. Welcome to the Beyond the Waves Celtic Football Show. My name is Graham Wilson. Very, very early morning, but well worth it. Today we have joining us a man that I've been wanting to talk to for quite some time, and I'm absolutely delighted that he's joined us over the past couple weeks. I've gotten to know him as Jim, but he's probably most well known under his pen name, Brogan Rogan, Trevino, and Hogan. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on this weekend afternoon. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good morning to you. As I look out the window, it's lovely and sunny, and if you hear a strange noise in the background, I'm afraid I'm sitting in a very squeaky chair. It's not my bones that you hear, it's actually just the chair.
We will keep that in mind. Thank you for the heads up. And I just want you to know, we really appreciate your time this morning to get caught up with you yourself, and we're also hoping to learn a lot more about the new autobiography by W.Wallace, documenting a very important time for the club. The run in the European Cup, and really the formulation of one of the greatest footballing sides of all time, in my opinion. The first club that ever won the treble as we know it, the modern day consummation of a treble. The first British club to win the European Cup, and of course the first British player to hoist the cup. That's right. There's only one. There's only one King Billy, and that's McNeil.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's only one Scottish side that's won the European Cup. So last week when Willie was around doing some book signings, we just happened to be in the Admiral Bar in Waterloo Street, and we were given a replica of the cup. So I was walking about the centre of Glasgow with the cup, and wow. people would toot their horn because they knew fine well that if you were carrying that cup, you could only be supporting one team because there's nobody else here won it.
That's fantastic.
So you get a great reaction from people. There was lots of people who ignored you, totally, of course. But,
Sure.
But anybody that tooted the horn knew exactly what you were about, even if they didn't recognise the wee Bowley man walking next to me, whoever he might have been.
Yeah, save all the plaudits for later for him.
Okay, yeah. I'm now looking forward to 2 weeks without seeing him. I say that, Willie, if you're listening, Willie, I mean that in the nicest possible terms, that my ears are burning.
I'm sure.
Your incessant patter.
I'm sure the feeling is mutual.
Cheers, Graham. Whose side are you on?
Great. Well,
sorry, just a aside, give you a laugh. Yesterday we were in, amongst other places, the Celtic shop in Clydebank. And John, the guy that kind of runs the Celtic stores, found out that there was a fashion parade in the shopping centre. And he arranged for the models, one of whom I believe to be the current Miss Scotland,
lovely, to
come and have their photograph taken with Willie. And I say, I don't think he'll in any way take offence if I say he is a wee Bowley 72-year-old man. And suddenly the shop is filled with two gorgeous girls in evening wear, all kind of over him and giving him hugs and kisses and getting a photograph taken him. And immediately saying, phone Bertie Auld, this will really noise him up, phone Bertie Auld. And they had been with one another in the Radio Scotland studios earlier on in the week, and it was like Morecambe and Wise and the two Ronnies and Rowan and Martin's laughing. It was everything combined into one. And of course Bertie comes on the phone, and John says, Willie's here, and he's got Miss Scotland in one arm and another. He's got two birds on his arms, and basically he's saying, you can hear Bertie down the phone. The only birds he ever pulled was a parrot and an emu. and if there's a queue for him, it's all young boys looking for the older man experience. Get him to hell. Very funny. But a wee time with Willie, and we'll talk about Willie later, but a short time with Willie will reveal that he is not the quiet, introverted individual we were all led to believe he was.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent stuff. Jim, listen, if you were expecting any sort of nuance out of me at 6:30 a.m., let me.
I keep forgetting you're asleep.
the coffee has not kicked in yet. I promise it's going to be more diplomatic as our time goes on. But nonetheless, let's talk about you first off. Let's get to know you a bit more and learn more. You've gained, a lot of fanfare and a lot of attention from your writing, fantastic writing on Celtic Quick News, CQN. And your analytical style of writing. But let's talk about your pen name. I love this. I love the name, especially Trevino Hogan at the end. Two of my favorite golfers. I grew up as a competitive golfer, and I absolutely loved Ben Hogan growing up. How did that pen name come about? I mean, it's unique, it's catchy, it's easily identifiable. How did that name sort of come together as your moniker?
Well, really, as a result of ribbing I get from one of my friends, a guy called Raven Ferns, who will be absolutely delighted that I name checked him in any form ever, because I normally just give him abuse. We go to the pub on a regular basis, and I have been known to tell the odd story. And Raymond said to me one night, do you know that you cannot get through an hour of telling a story about anything, whether it's about war or famine or what happened to me today, without getting Lee Trevino in there somehow? And the crazy thing about that is I'm not a golfer. I play golf regularly, once every 10 years. Essentially, one night I was on CQN and I knew that Raymond posted as RP McMurphy. I don't think he posts anymore. And he came on and he said something one night in CQN, and I thought, that's just rubbish. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to reply, but I'll have to come up with a name, because everybody's got a name, like
Sure.
Old Tim or Young Tim or
Sure.
BJ Mac.
Well, and RP McMurphy, Snake Plissken, I mean, there's all these names.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a who's who of pantomime characters. So I had to come up with something. And I've always rhymed words. And so I thought of two slightly not obscure, but the lesser lauded Celtic players. And I come up with Brogan and Rogan. And I was going on to think of Logan and Wogan and Grogan and God knows what else. And then I come up with Hogan. And of course, as you say, you come up with a ghost. Hogan's just a legendary figure. And I then, to my own mind, thought, I'll tell you what, I'll throw Trevino in there somewhere and just see if he picks up that it's me. So on we go, and to come up with a name, Brogan, Rogan, Trevino and Hogan. And I thought no more about it. It was meant to be a one-off for that night. And what I said was no more than about 3 or 4 lines on. It wasn't the dawning of any form of decision to write or to constantly post or to write stories or anything else. I just put up the name for the first time ever. And it stuck. It stuck to the extent whereby I am now stuck with it. If I wanted to change it to anything else, I think I would be shot.
That's it.
And that is literally how it came about. No more than as a result of a taunt saying that I can't go too long without mentioning Lee Trevino. And of course now, by pure happenstance, if you like, I don't go 20 minutes without mentioning Lee Trevino, because everything I write down goes out as Brogan, Rogan, Trevino and Hogan. So he gets a mention there almost constantly. I should really, because I suppose, write to him and say, listen, wee man, give me a share of your royalties. You earn more than me.
That is true. That is true. The sales of top flight golf balls have gone through the roof over the past couple of years.
Yeah, well,
Excellent.
Not bad for a wee Mexican from a dirt shack.
Not bad at all. Who once took Ray Floyd's money. But that's a story for another time.
Yes.
Now, tell us, how did a boy from the West End come to support a team called Glasgow Celtic? I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear you say it. Tell us how you came to support Celtic. Was it in your lineage? Was it passed down from your parents? Just from the earliest age that you can recall?
Easy. Primarily responsible would be my dad. My dad was originally from Donegal in Ireland, but came to Clydebank when he was 2, and he used to run buses from Clydebank to Celtic Park. He was the secretary of Celtic Supporters Club down there at one point, and he travelled all over Scotland, and I've actually got one of his stories written down somewhere called The Penny Special, because you're going back now to the 40s, after the war, where for this princely sum of a penny, an old-fashioned British penny, you could go on the bus and go to any away game in Scotland.
Wow.
A penny would take you to Aberdeen or to Beyond or to Dumfries or whatever.
Wow.
And back. And his love of Celtic just shone through, really.
Mm-hmm.
But and not only the love of the team, and he would go on and on about the favourites that he had in the team, whether it be Jimmy Delaney or later Charlie Tully or Neely Mochan, whoever. But also, and this was definitely passed to me, the camaraderie of the support.
Mm-hmm.
The support is just immense, absolutely immense. And again, I know we'll talk about Willie later on, but when you meet somebody like Willie, who, if you like, wasn't raised in the same tradition as me, and didn't get it passed down from his parents or from his father about supporting Celtic. Mm-hmm. Willie talks about the fact that this support invades your being. It becomes absolutely part of your fabric. Mm-hmm. And so for me, my dad was very instrumental, but equally my mum's family. They were Farrells, not related to Jimmy Farrell, the former director. But they all had a great big Celtic support as well. And when, obviously you get my mum and dad talking about football. My mum was an international netballer. And what I grew up with, having been born in 1961, I was 6 years old when Celtic won the European Cup.
Your timing is impeccable.
and I know. And from then till I was 11 or 12, if you like, when we were really at our zenith, I grew up believing that Celtic could beat anybody, absolutely anybody in the planet. And I hate to say it, 40 years on, I actually still believe that. Mm. I go to every game believing that we will win. And I can't help myself. You could put out the greatest team on earth. We put out the greatest team on earth, Barcelona, and they got it.
Yep. And it just went to your plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And yep. And I'm not joking to say this. Yeah, you have to kind of measure that passion with reason.
Yeah. Because
obviously you do get teams where right now you think, oh God, they will be a real tough test for us. Mm. But deep in my heart, there are nights, there are occasions, and I genuinely feel that, where you think, I know that you will win, I know that something's going to happen here. Mm-hmm. And I can't quite explain that, but deep in my fabric, deep in my soul, there are times when you just think, but you know what, this is us tonight.
And I think there's so many people who feel the exact same way. I mean, I think that's ingrained throughout the entire support. I mean, what happened in that European Cup run, and not just in 1967, but 1970, coming up just short, but that run of 9 in a row where, Jock Stein put out a team that was repeatedly absolutely unstoppable. I mean, a force throughout Europe, widely known. Jimmy Johnson, as well as, all of the great players from that time. And I think that it carries through, not just, to present day, but everything in between, where the support have that mentality. And it isn't even people, who were supporting Celtic at the time or who were even alive at the time, but that mentality permeates through. And I think that many times that carries the team. I mean, you saw the example of that against Barcelona last November, where, to exactly the point that you're describing, maybe the greatest team that's ever walked the earth. I mean, certainly on the decline of their strongest powers, but nonetheless, I mean, on paper, you look at that and nobody saw that coming. And you have to give fair dues to the support for getting behind the players to the point where it permeated them. I mean, I think that's absolutely crucial in order to getting results like that. Yes, you can have, the superior players, the talent, the technique, etc. But if the players don't believe, then you can forget about it.
Yep. Well, two things about that, Dave. One, Henrik Larsson gave an interview, in fact, just at the time of the Barcelona game. And he made a comment, and as you know, Henrik is not the most, how can I put it? If I say vociferous, he's not the most passionate when he speaks in terms of his speaking voice. Mm. I know he's passionate inside, but in terms of his speaking voice, he's not a guy who's inclined towards hyperbole and banging drums and whatever. Mm-hmm. But he made a comment, and he said, make no mistake that when you run out at Celtic Park and you have that crowd behind you, You will run faster. You will jump higher. You will run for longer. They are the 12th man. Now, I genuinely believe, in fact, I know that the European Cup winning team took the view that they would win in Lisbon. And part of the reason that they took the view that they would win in Lisbon is because all the fans believed that they would win in Lisbon. And those fans who had obviously only the year before won the league, Celtic had been in the doldrums before the reappearance of Stephen's manager. But the minute the momentum started to move, the minute the kind of drive forward to Europe started, those fans believed we would win. They had that very belief that I'm talking about. Now, it might have been illogical. Although when you look back, I would argue that it's not illogical because they had played Liverpool the year before and had come very close, other than for the disallowed goal with Bobby Leonard.
Right.
But those fans went to Lisbon believing that they would win, and when they did. Now, if I come all the way forward to no later than last Friday, I happened to go into Watterson's bookshop in Glasgow just to see, to make sure actually that they were putting Willie's book in the right place and stuff like that.
Sure.
And I came across a football book called 50 Teams That Mattered. And of course, as is my want, I thought, let's have a look and see what teams matter.
Yeah, exactly. Let's evaluate the credence and the credibility of this book by seeing where they have the 67 Celtic team.
Absolutely. Well, it runs in chronological order, and immediately before it, interestingly, of course, they go to Real Madrid and Di Stefano, Puskas, Hento, Santa Maria, etc., etc., etc.
Right. Yeah.
They run through Benfica, Bela Gutman's Benfica, and the emergence of Eusebio in 1962-63. They go through Herrera's Grand Inter and the money that he spent in comparative terms to just now.
Sure.
And then they come to Celtic. And if I can describe a book or a set of words where the description of these three teams that I've just mentioned is factual, don't get me wrong, it is reverential. You can't talk about the early Real Madrid without being kind of blown away a wee bit about their footballing powers. You can't talk about people like Eusebio without kind of being in awe. Herrera's Inter, it was La Grand Inter. It was the creation of a football club by someone who was, a football team I should say, by someone who was regarded as the great modern thinker in Europe. I mean,
and the advent of Catenaccio, more so than the apex player, if you will.
Absolutely, but at the same time, people talk of Puskas and Di Stefano's Real Madrid. They talk of Herrera's Inter. Herrera was the first, if you like, iconic manager. Whether you liked his tactics or not, he was the manager emerging from the shadows, if you like. But when it comes to Celtic, here is a team which this book describes as changing football in a way that it had never been changed before, that was necessary, because it was recognised that Herrera's Catenaccio style was a stranglehold in the game. He did what good managers actually do. He forced other teams to change the way they would normally play to combat his style. That's what a good manager does. Steen, in turn, did all sorts of things which nobody had ever heard of, and still haven't heard of.
Yeah.
The whole idea of the players coming from the 30-mile radius, never done before, never repeated again, never will be repeated as far as I'm concerned.
No.
Anybody who repeats that feat wants sainthood.
Yeah.
But also the style of play and the pace at which that team could play was revolutionary. And Barry Davis, the BBC commentator, did a Radio 5 programme a number of years ago called The Great Teams of Europe. And he made it quite plain that between 67 and, say, 72, Glasgow Celtic were the greatest team in Europe. It didn't matter who won, or Feyenoord's winning, or whatever other team would win in the intervening period. None could reach the level of consistency in Europe that Celtic established at that time. Not until the full emergence of the great Ajax team, and then later Bayern Munich. Celtic were it for 5 seasons. And Celtic fans who are born later when we talk of the Lisbon Lions, shouldn't ever think of them as a one-season team, because that is just not the case. But not only that, the way that that team played had a direct bearing on what eventually came out of Holland. More importantly, I go back to the fans, the experience of 1967 completely changed the way that UEFA, in its emerging decade, if you like, saw European Cup finals. The Celtic fans in Lisbon had never been done before. The travelling support is a Parkhead phenomenon.
It became
and
a spectacle.
Everything that's gone from there is down to Celtic.
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity was so clear as a result of that. The spectacle that this could be. The European Cup final. And obviously UEFA, as you describe it, in sort of the emerging decade, and seeing the financial opportunity and the opportunity to grow the game. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. When you see footage of the Celtic supporters running out onto that park and the elation that gripped them, and the stories of how many Celtic supporters just flocked into Lisbon. The pictures of Billy McNeil outside, flanked by police with Celtic supporters all around, holding the European Cup. I mean, those are images and memories that tug at heartstrings that, transcend not just the people that were there, but generations after. I mean, people that weren't there, people that weren't born, they see that and they feel a part of it. That's part of supporting Celtic, is understanding what happened there, because everything after that was a direct relation to it.
Well, absolutely, but more than that, Graham, because if you listen to the BBC commentary by Kenneth Rosenholm, who's a famous commentator, he at the end, and it's on YouTube, says the European Cup final has never seen scenes like this before. Now, in amongst the Celtic fans on the pitch, make no mistake, there were loads of Portuguese, because if you go to Portugal and you mention Celtic, in particular if you go to Lisbon or the area around Lisbon, the 1967 European Cup final sticks in their mind, because Portugal, as a footballing nation, wanted to see the end of Catenaccio. Catenaccio at that time, they took the view, stunted the Benfica team or any other Portuguese team. And W.Wallace talks about the fact that by the time he left the pitch, he'd lost his shorts, his shirt. He actually went down the tunnel with nothing but his jockstrap. And he says it was Portuguese guys that took them. He says everybody just wanted a piece of you. It was, he said, the emotion and the elation that came from the crowd at the final whistle was a complete shock.
Yeah.
They were delighted to have won the game, but there was a wave of almost like revolution, in the sense that you've done it, you have killed the beast.
It was a triumph of good over evil. Not just for Celtic supporters, but football supporters in general. The first, and ironically enough, not just the first British team, but the first Northern European team. I mean, think about the winners and the teams of prominence prior to that. They were all Mediterranean, Southern European teams. The Benfica, the Real Madrid, and obviously the advent of the Italian sides, Herrera's Inter. And to have such an attacking side, to not just unlock the Catenaccio, to sort of dig into that pun, but do it in such an amazingly attacking, aggressive, in your face style. I mean, what was it? The tribute to Herrera in that final there. I mean, he deserves more credit than he actually gets. I mean, obviously the result was in Celtic's favor, but I mean, his system is a testament to that. Its effectiveness limited it to just 2-1. I mean, with 42 shots on goal and just wave after wave, attack after attack. I mean, it should have been 6-1.
Yes, of course it should have. If it wasn't for the goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper was looked upon as a weak link with the Celtic players. Sarti was considered to be a bit of a ropey keeper. But if it weren't for Sarti, you're right, it would have been 6-1.
Let's talk about the book a little bit. Let's dig into this. You're on a dais of obviously Willie Wallace himself, but included in this piece, Rod Stewart wrote a piece, Archie McPherson, of course Willie Wallace. Tell us what it's like to be on a panel of writers, that are coming together in the form of this book. What was it like working alongside of them, and what were your thoughts? I mean, obviously, did you know that these were going to be sort of your your comrades in putting this together, and what sort of, did that add any pressure? Did it affect your thinking at all? Tell us, what the process was from the time that you were asked to contribute to this.
Honestly, no pressure at all, none at all. And the reason I say that, I think I was out for a drink when this was first mentioned.
Seems reasonable.
That'd be a change right now.
Seems reasonable.
Unusual experience there. I was with David Falls of CQN. David produces the CQN magazine. And we were in a pub in the West End with his colleague Tony Warrington. And he said, would you like... I had to ask him twice if he had said what I thought he had just said. He said, would you like to write Willie Wallace's biography or autobiography? And you're there on a Saturday night, you've had a couple of pints, and I said, sorry. He said it again. And I think at first I must have looked at him as if he was taking unlawful substances. I thought, you're off your head. Where is this coming from?
Where are the Class A drugs?
We'd been there for about an hour and a bit, and we'd talked about, we were just swapping stories, and I said, sorry. And he explained that he was in some way related to Olive, Willie's wife, and in turn, Willie had been planning and doing a book for a number of years, and he had written so much with a friend of his in Australia called Michael Nowling, and they'd got it that far. And David said, I am minded to produce a Willie biography, autobiography. Would you fancy writing in it? And then I thought, right, okay, having got the message eventually, I thought, right, okay, this will be a couple of pages or something like that. That's fine. And he said, no. He says, do you fancy really getting involved in this? And I have to be honest and say that even amidst the kind of fug of a pub and a night out on a Saturday night, my heart immediately leaped because I had never ever understood why no one had written about Wallace before. And again, Willie, if you're listening, that was a lie. You should write about you should send you back to Australia to finish your sentence. I don't know why you sent in the first place. Must have done something really bad to go for 30 odd years there. Anyway, but I didn't understand why, to my knowledge, nobody in Scotland had picked up on the idea of writing about Willie Wallace.
Yeah, why is that?
Graham, I have no idea. And the reason that I don't understand it is that once we had decided that I was going to do this, I went to a meeting with David and Tony out to Paul Brennan's offices, Paul Brennan, Paul 67 CQN, and it was still a kind of embryonic project at that time. And I remember sitting there and I turned to Paul and I said, and Paul has since described Willie as the player that he didn't know about, the lost lion, if you like, the one that nobody can get a hold of and the one that nobody knew too much about. And in the course of talking to people about the book, I said to them, if I say Willie Wallace to you, what comes to mind? And to a man, everybody said, oh, when you think of the Lions, you think of wee Jimmy, Tommy Gemmell, Bobby Murdoch, Bertie. And Wallace was a great player, but he was under the radar, if you like. He was not a big personality. And at this meeting, I turned to the other three and I said, do you realise what you've got here? And don't get me wrong, they did. And I'm not saying that I'm a soothsayer of any type, but I had already looked at the stats. I'd looked at them a long time ago and said, do you realise how good Wallace was? Do you actually understand that his goal-scoring rate at Hearts, at Raith Rovers, at Stenhousemuir, everywhere he went, Wallace's figures are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And when you read the comments from the other players in the team, the other Celtic players in the team. I wouldn't go so far as to say that they talk about Willie in reverential terms, because that bunch were never reverential about anything.
I can't picture it.
Absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
But one thing stuck in my mind. Bobby Lennox made a comment, and Bobby was perhaps just about, not quite, the most sincere wouldn't be the right phrase, but he was the most factual. He made the comment, he said, Wallace went about everything he did on the field of play in a manner which was just 100% constant. He was there all the time, and what he brought to the team, what he brought out the other players, made those players better. He made what was already a good side, if not a great side, unbelievably much better, because he just, the way he played, the way he linked with the play, the way that he played just off the centre forward, and his movement off the ball. And bear in mind that when Jock Stein signed him, he said that he thought he had signed an entire forward line, because in his career, Willie had played outside right, inside right, centre forward, inside left, and outside left.
Well, and he was on a temporary contract to begin with, wasn't he?
6 months. When he won the European Cup, he was in a 6 months contract. And the book opens with Willie's account of a mad, I think it's 36 days, where he scored 2 goals against Aberdeen to win the Scottish Cup. He won the European Cup. He played for the Scotland team that beat England at Wembley. He won the league. He won effectively everything there was in Scottish football in the space of something like 36 days.
So, I mean, what's that conversation like? Jock Stein approached. So, you fancy a permanent move then? It's like, yeah, that'll do me.
Well, he describes it in the book. He was in loggerheads with Hearts for a period of 2 years before that, because in the old-fashioned football contracts, he had no say in where he worked. And he had been asking the then manager, Tommy Walker, for a move, or for a pay rise, I should say, but was getting nowhere. And there had been rumoured that he was going to go to, I think it was Stoke or Sunderland for 80,000 quid. When out of the blue, the word came that Jock Stein was interested. And he describes in the book, and I don't want to ruin the book for anybody that hasn't bought it or hasn't read it yet, he describes going to Celtic Park on his own. Absolutely on his own, and sitting on a bench outside the boardroom underneath a portrait of John Thompson, wondering, what am I doing here? What's going to happen here? And within half an hour, he was offered a contract to Celtic, to which he originally said no. As he was sitting there, he said, no, I'm not coming here for that. There was no signing on fee or anything like that mentioned. And you have to bear in mind that Willie later became a spokesman for the PFA. So he originally said no, and when he said no, and he thought, I'm not too sure I'm doing the right thing here, saying no to Jock Stein.
Sure, yeah.
Stein very quickly went to the Hearts people and sorted that out. And so on 6 December 1966, Willie became a Celtic player.
But you get the sense that very quickly he grasped what the club. I mean, obviously playing in Scotland, even at that time. I mean, it's clear what Celtic. How big Celtic is as an entity, not just a football club or a team. But you get the sense that he understood pretty quickly what the club meant to the supporters. What it represented and what it meant. I mean, how much it meant to the supporters.
Well. Again, and this actually isn't in the book. This is just a story from last week. He was with BRTH giving a Radio Scotland interview last week, which, by the way, everybody should listen to. It is knockout stuff. The pair of them are it's unbelievable. I'm not joking. Unbelievable. But Kenny McIntyre asked, about playing for Celtic, and of course Bertie goes on and says, I'm the only person that's ever signed for Celtic for 3 times, and then Willie interjects and goes, what, did you not like them or something? He says, you kept trying to get rid of you, and he says, you've been here that long, I'm sure you played with Jimmy McGrory. But Willie all the joking about suddenly leaves his voice, and he says, "Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed every club I played for. I enjoyed Stenhousemuir. I loved my 2 years at Raith Rovers. I was very happy at Hearts. Had they offered me more money, I would never have sought to leave Hearts. I enjoyed my year at Crystal Palace. I enjoyed playing at Dumbarton, because he had a very important role at Dumbarton, which I'll come back to afterwards. Remind me about that. He said, but Celtic, and again, here's a guy that's been in Australia for 30 odd years. Again, he came from a background which there was no Celtic supporters in his family. He describes sitting in the stand in a game. I think it was was it the Vojvodina? Yes, the Vojvodina game. And he got the support, and he described the feeling coming over him where he says, "Oh, this is the place for me. This is the place for me."
Yeah.
He says, the club I knew when I was coming, I was making a step up from Hearts, and I was going to go and play in a better team than the Hearts team, although Hearts were a good team at the time. And he said, and I knew that Celtic had a big support, but there was a feeling that just meant this is the place for me. And that feeling's never left. Now, yesterday, I think we were sitting having he and I had a rolling sausage yesterday. Now, how mad is that? As I was growing up as a wee boy, how mental would it be to be able to think, down the line, you're going to go for a rolling sausage and a cup of tea with a Lisbon Lion? And at this point, I have to add that much to Willie's chagrin, where we were having the rolling sausage was a well-known bakery called All's. And he said, if you're ever asked, say we were in Greg's, don't tell that bugger we were ever in a shop called All's. Never admit to him we were in there. Anyway, and he said, just out of the blue, he said, do you know that my wife loved Celtic? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Olive, and she was a PE teacher, I think, and a hockey player. He said she didn't go to the games anywhere else, or she went to one or two games anywhere else. In fact, she went to a couple of games at Crystal Palace, and down there she came across something that she'd never seen before, like a players' lounge, because there was no players' lounge at Celtic Park.
Right.
But he said, Olive loves Celtic. And I said, oh, interesting, why? And he said, oh, she just grew to love the place and the fans and the atmosphere and the teammates and the whole ethos around the place. And to this day, that's the way she feels about it. So it wasn't just Willie that got imbued into this as a young man. It was his wife, and of course they were young, they were newly married. There was just a magic about the place that would get to a guy who was a professional footballer, and let's not forget that.
First and foremost, yeah.
All of the squad, they were professional footballers.
Right.
They were people who wanted to make their way in the world playing football. And if it wasn't going to work for you at Celtic, the necessity was that you would have to ply your trade somewhere else.
Well, I mean, especially in a time when, I mean, these were not millionaires. These were not, players that were on hundreds of thousands of dollars a week, as they probably would be today. These were players, as you described, that are trying to eke out an existence playing football.
Absolutely. At the same time, Willie had a partnership in a garage down in Yoka, a garage that sold cars. Football on its own wasn't effectively enough to sustain. He was getting what some would consider a reasonable wage at that time. I think it was 50 quid a week.
Jeez.
I
mean, 50 quid would obviously go further than it would today, but still, I mean, that's not
in
lavish.
Comparative terms, it's nothing.
Yeah, no question.
But the point was that in looking back all those years, Willie believed he is Celtic to the core. And it is so obvious when you speak to him. Yeah,
no question.
Obvious.
No question. You really get a sense for not just who not just W.Wallace, but and my takeaway from this book is it's a first-hand account of not just himself and his thoughts and his experiences and what he was witnessing, but you get a real sense for who these men are. I mean, obviously certain members of the Lions are more of an open book than others. Obviously, Bertie Auld. Bertie Auld is just every situation that you see Bertie Auld in. I mean, being interviewed, meeting supporters, etc. I mean, you always have a laugh coming from your belly, but it sounds like you get a real sense for the feelings, the thoughts, the experiences that not just Willie was experiencing, but all of the Lions were going through during that run, and especially that great period that followed on after that, where they were absolutely unstoppable.
Absolutely, and what also comes across, and it's a shame in a way, because had I witnessed firsthand the camaraderie that exists and Willie's personality, because I only spoke to Willie on the phone before writing my part of the book. I hadn't met him in 40 years. And so had I gotten his chatty and forceful personality and his camaraderie, for example, with Bertie and John Clark, then I would have added more of that into the book. And it would have changed a wee bit, because what is quite so obvious is that if you imagine, I suppose, you get somebody who plays for a football club for 5.5 years, and then they move on to somewhere else, and then they move on to somewhere else, that you would have an acquaintanceship and you would have a friendship with people that you played with previously at all the different clubs, and that none would necessarily be greater than the other. I'm sorry, but what I wrote something in CQN last night which said, there will come a time when Bertie Auld and Willie Wallace act their age. It won't be any time soon. Because the devilment is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the closeness that there is between those who were left. As he said himself, he's living in Bridge of Allen while he's here. He got on a train last week, and the train he got on just happened by pure chance to have Jim Craig and his wife on the same train. And I said, how did that come about? He said, I don't know. He says, but my eyesight was better and I'd seen him first, and I got on another carriage. And it's just really funny the way they interact with one another. These are really, really close people. They are a team 40-something years on, and that speaks volumes about the people concerned and the camaraderie that was engineered by Steen and everybody else at Celtic Park.
And that's a good point, too. I mean, you do get a sense also that Willie Wallace understood the impact that Jock Stein had on that Celtic team that had languished. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Prior to his arrival, there were some bleak times for Celtic and the support in terms of getting results. Obviously, the Coronation Cup was standing, but Willie Wallace really understood what Jock Stein meant in terms of preparation, in terms of nutrition, in terms of training, and in terms of tactics as well. Tell us about any sort of revelations or what he comes out with that sheds light on just how important it is. I mean, obviously that point and Jock Stein and his impact has been documented feverishly, but you really can't belabor that point and what it meant to that team enough.
He says that Stein never told him what to do, never told him how to play, never told any of them how to play. Moulded certain players into certain positions, like making Bertie an inside left as opposed to a left winger, moving Bobby Murdoch back, and doing those kind of things. But what he says is that essentially Steen saw the player and moulded his team to the player. There is a player who can do a job with these other guys around you. And he would say wee things like, listen, I've seen you doing this in training. Maybe you could try that. Maybe you could do this. Maybe you could do the next thing. But it was never an instruction. The player was allowed to play. The player was allowed to feel what was natural within their game, but adapt it to what Steen wanted in terms of the Celtic way and in terms of what Steen wanted as an end result for his team. And bear in mind a comment that's made within the book. Alex Ferguson, who of course was playing at that time, later made a comment saying that the Lisbon Lions forward line could hurt you in oh so many ways. Everybody could hurt you. And my take on that is that this is why Wallace was absolutely key in many respects. He was an absolutely fantastic off-the-ball runner. And when it came to playing against the bigger teams, the good teams, even the great teams like Inter, I said before that what Steen, in my reading of Steen, always wanted to do was to force a team to move the way you wanted them to move. So, for example, when Willie ran off the ball, somebody from the defence had to go with him. That left somebody in space, especially if it was the case that as Willie ran off the ball, wee Jimmy went by his man.
Right.
Because the defence is now 2 men down. And if you're 2 men down in a defence and you're faced with Lennox, McBride, or Chalmers, or Auld, or Murdoch coming in, you've lost.
You're going to pay, yeah.
You're going to pay the price. And so when, for example, everybody, again, and I trust me, you can probably hear my voice, I love this. I absolutely love doing this. When you look at the account of the winning goal at Lisbon, my favourite account starts with Stevie Chalmers, because Stevie talks about throughout the course of the game he kept coming back to the halfway line. The instructions from Steen and Lisbon were that Wallace and Chalmers were to run out of the penalty box. They were to stay out of the way, pull Inter Milan apart, take Peachy and the other centre half, whose name I forget for a minute, move them about, because that's what they do. And as it got towards the end of the game and it's 1-1, Stevie says, I was absolutely fed up being outside the box, and we had practiced this routine whereby shots and crosses were swung in from left and right, and Willie's job and my job was to divert the ball and turn the ball into the net, which of course is exactly what Stevie did. However, he starts his account of that goal by saying Tom Gemmell comes down the left-hand side, and as he comes down, and bear in mind that Inter Milan have got 3 central defenders, they've got 2 central defenders and they've got the sweeper. As Tom is down the left-hand side, Willie Wallace runs, as you face the goal, from right to left. He runs towards the ball. That means that his marker has to follow him. It also means that the sweeper takes a step to the right as well. He takes 2 steps, because if the ball's played into Willie and Willie gets by his marker, the sweeper has got to be there. That is what the perceived danger was. And of course, instead what happens is that Tom Gemmell knocks it back to Bobby Murdoch. Bobby Murdoch swings it in, and there in the middle of the penalty box, perhaps for the first time in the game, Stevie Chalmers sits and there's space in front of him. And he says the key part to that is, yes, Tommy has to come down the side, but Willie has to make that run. Willie has to move them about. And that Steen tactic worked perfectly. It only had to work the once.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, if you then study the third goal for that Celtic scored at Celtic Park against Dukla Prague, where the ball was played, and it's an off-talk-about goal, it's a free kick, and Berthiaud suddenly puts the ball down and says, Willie, do you see the gap? And Willie says yes. And of course, everybody's expecting Bobby Murdoch or Tommy Gemmell to have a shot from there, because it's outside the box. Willie, do you see the gap? Absolutely unpracticed, unrehearsed. Yeah, I see it. Bertie knocks the ball to Willie, and Willie strikes the ball from 25 yards and it flies in. However, again, if you watch on YouTube, just as Bertie is placing the ball on the ground, from behind the goal you will see Stevie Chalmers with exactly the same run, left to right. The wall is lined up. Dukla Prague are expecting Gemmell or Murdoch to take a shot. Bertie knocks the ball to his right. Stevie makes the run, and you can see the defender saying, wait a minute. And in a split instant, they're looking to see where he's going. Willie Wallace fires the ball home. It's movement off the ball. And that is the key thing, I think, in the Wallace-Chalmers, or what was meant to be the Wallace-McBride relationship up front. And it's movement off the ball. And the best I've seen at it since was Henrik. Because Henrik's move off the ball, I keep going on about, was the best with his left foot or his right foot and his head. His movement off the ball was absolutely superb.
Yeah, I mean, he really did absolutely everything. Well, that's a good segue. I mean, what player? Who would you compare? I mean, I know this is such a difficult exercise to go through, especially over eras. But to give us a better sense, I mean, for those of us who weren't even alive then and who didn't see Willie Wallace play, who would you liken him to? Not just in this current team, but in the sort of modern era of Celtic. Maybe in the past decade. What sort of player was he? Was he? And the reason why I bring this up is just through the descriptions and what I've seen of him in the footage is he reminds me a lot of Henrik Larsson for those reasons that you bring up. I mean, Willie Wallace was an excellent finisher in his own right, but oftentimes he'd be the one creating the bullets for other people to fire. He was so effective with that, and Henrik did that extremely well. In addition to, just being a prolific goal scorer. But, you talk about sort of the unsung hero, and there's a bit of the Joe Ledley in there that does so much for the other players around them. But, oftentimes it's unseen and maybe not getting as much credit. But in your mind, I mean, he did so much, so it's difficult. But who would be some players that you'd liken Willie Wallace to in sort of the current day Celtic, if you will?
In build, he's not dissimilar to Gary Hooper. Not the tallest, not a soft touch, a thin fella but stocky, like a bit like a boxer. I did pull his leg right enough the other day because I don't know if you've seen the photo that's on the cover of the book. Mm-hmm. I was saying to him, the trouble we had photoshopping your head onto that body. Okay. And he goes, away you go, you bugger. I pull his leg about that. But he was well built, very fast, very pacey. Not as pacey as Bobby Lennox, obviously, but then who was? In terms of his movement off the ball, I'd agree with you. Very similar in many respects to Henrik. Mm. But strangely, I'm going to go to a player who's not a Celtic player and describing Willie and at the same time telling you something that Willie will tell you himself. Mm. He says that almost 50% of the goals that he scored for Celtic came from Jimmy.
Yeah.
Because Jimmy would go by people and Jockstein told Jimmy, just get the ball in the box, or told Willie to get the ball in the box, or to get in the box rather, and Jimmy will find you. Mm-hmm. Jimmy will get by somebody and find you. Mm-hmm. So, in that vein, I remember reading an article by John Aldridge, who played for Liverpool in Ireland. And John Aldridge talked about the POMO, P-O-M-O, the position of maximum opportunity. And Willie Wallace, in his goals, personified the idea of find the POMO, find the position of maximum opportunity, find space in the box and be able to do something with it. Now, whether that be a layoff or whether it be poaching a goal, that's what he did. So, for example, one of his first goals for Celtic was a header from very close range, which came from a knock across the goal by Joe McBride from a Bertie Auld cross. And what you will find if you look at videos, and in actual fact there are relatively few videos of Willie, but there is one in existence which shows him scoring 30 or 35 goals, which Willie has the master copy of, which he's going to send me, which we'll post somewhere. He scores a lot of goals from close in because he is in the right place at the right time, which in itself is a talent.
Absolutely. That instinct, game. Yeah, no question.
At the same time, you will also see footage of him where he comes back and he wins the ball and he distributes the ball. Against the Dukla Prague game at Celtic Park, you see him winning the ball close to the halfway line, swings it out wide, and he bullets towards the penalty area to get into that position of maximum opportunity. So in terms of who he's like, as I say, finishing-wise, built like Gary Hooper. Intelligence-wise, yes, absolutely like Henrik. But to be quite honest, he was just Willie Wallace. He was who he was. And what I have come to realise and what people have to stop and consider this as an amazing. This is one of the reasons why I was quite excited about being asked to do this. Jock Stein knew what he was getting at Celtic Park when he came back as manager. He knew the Gemmels and the McNeils and the Murdochs and the Gallaghers and all of John Clark, Ronnie Simpson, etc., etc. Of all the footballers in the world, he chose to sign one to strengthen that squad. Now, that simple fact would make me want to find out why on earth he would want to sign Willie Wallace.
Yeah.
Because he could have gone and chased Alan Gilzean at Tottenham Hotspur, he could have gone and chased it, and we know that Celtic are not particularly forthcoming with the pennies. But of all the people that were around at the time, and Willie had been around for a long, he was 26 by that time, he was top scorer for Hearts for 5 seasons in a row, he'd scored goals with Raith Rovers. Stein knew who Wallace was. Why did he go and get Willie Wallace as opposed to anybody else? And that's answered in the book.
Oh, this is riveting stuff. We're chatting with Brogan Rogan, Trevino, and Hogan of CQN, definite repute and fame. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is an absolute treat. Certainly in the close season, it's a bit of a letdown after obviously doing the double. It's a fantastic season for Celtic this year, but just really enjoying catching up with you today and just chatting about Celtic and just learning so much, continuing to learn so much about the history of Celtic. It's just it's phenomenal stuff. What is this book? The autobiography by Willie Wallace. It's out right now. You can find it, details on CQN. I'll retweet the link to it. But what does this book offer the reader that no other Lisbon Lions book has hitherto sort of brought forth? I mean, obviously there's been a whole host of Lisbon Lions books, but for the person who's sitting here listening and saying, all right, I've got a whole catalog of Lisbon Lions books and artifacts and et cetera. Why do they need to get this book? What does this book give us that's different and that's a supplement in addition to everything that you've described so far?
Well, Bertie the other day said, this should have been done bloody years ago.
I can see him saying that.
Seriously, what the hell are you doing? Well, it gives Willie's account. And it gives, it just almost what I said a moment ago, it gives the account of the guy who came in from the cold. It gives the account of the bloke who, unlike the rest, perhaps Bertie and Ronnie Simpson apart, they'd all been at Celtic Park, literally all their lives. Now, Ronnie came, of course, the great story about Ronnie is that Ronnie left Hibs to get away from Jock Stein. Ronnie thought Big Jock didn't fancy him and left. and when Faber Simpson found out that Stein was to be the new manager at Celtic, he thought, oh my God, not again. What is it? It gives that. And of course, Bertie had been down at Birmingham. Did you know that Bertie Auld had played against Inter Milan before?
When was this?
The final of the Fairs Cup, 1962-63. Willie Wallace had played against Inter Milan before.
Oh, yeah.
For Hearts.
Yeah.
So you get insights like that. Do you want the real insight? Do you want the real exclusive as to what happens in the book that you wouldn't have read anywhere else?
Go on, let's have it.
Jimmy Johnson, Willie O'Neill and Bobby Lennox used to cause mayhem in the golf course by hiding in bushes, and suddenly when the other lot were playing and the ball went down the driveway, they would grab the balls and throw them in the sea, bunkers, hide them under cowpats, whatever else. I thought it was a great laugh. they would literally sleek about the golf course and ruin their game.
No,
However, this would not always go to plan. Because if they saw a ball coming down and knew it was the Celtic lot and they got the ball and they hid it somewhere really bad and then found a thundering Stein looking for his ball, at that point they bolted.
Well, I was gonna.
Oh Christ, made a mistake. Right.
Yeah, it was right there. Yeah,
So it gives lots of funny stories from Willie.
Wow.
About various things that happened and shouldn't have happened. So there's that aspect to it. There is the aspect of him playing he played with Jim Baxter at Raith Rovers. Tells a great story about Jim Baxter at Raith Rovers coming to play Rangers, and reveals very honestly that Jim Baxter, when he was told he was being signed by Rangers, didn't want to go. He kicked up a fuss and tried everything he could not to go to Ibrox.
Seems reasonable.
So there's stories about that. He played with Alfie Conn Sr. He played with Dennis Mochan, Neely Mochan's brother. So there's things like that. I said I would mention Dumbarton because Willie played for a couple of years with Dumbarton, and he got a great reception at Celtic Park. He always scored against Celtic. The game that led Steen to finally sign him for Celtic was at Tynecastle against Hearts, for Hearts beat Celtic 3-2, and Willie scored 2 goals. He caused the defence real problems that night. So there's discussion about that. But at Dumbarton, he was obviously an older player by that time, and he had a coaching role for 14 youngsters. And he says with great pride that all 14 went on to have a career in football.
And that's what you want.
And he sees that as a real achievement, because it's very often the case that young players drop out or this, that and the next. And among the 14 were Colin McAdam, Tom McAdam, Murdo MacLeod, Graham Sinclair, Ian Wallace, and he mentioned various others, all of whom went on to have good professional careers.
Wow.
And he says, you know what, I played a part in that, and I feel privileged to have played a part in that, because as you said, Graham, earlier on, at that particular time, none of these people were millionaires.
Right.
And Willie certainly wasn't a millionaire, and they wanted to earn a living. And Willie saw his function at Dumbarton being very different to his function at Celtic. Celtic was an out-and-out player and a goal scorer. By the time you got to Dumbarton, he wanted to bring young players on. And he brought all of them on, every single one.
Yeah, and in addition to, I mean, we all have this, millionaires, not millionaires. I'm certainly very far from that, but you have, your work. I mean, you have different things that you want to get out of it. Obviously, you're trying to get a living and trying to feed your family and make money, but there are other things that make it worthwhile. For footballers, it's winning medals and trophies and making cup finals and things of that nature. When you get into that sort of coaching and bringing up young players, that's what you aspire to do. That's the sort of contentment and the goal that you have, to bring through players like Murdo MacLeod and to see the success. I mean, that it was worthwhile, and to see your direct impact on that's got to be especially fulfilling. And
that it becomes quite plain that never leaves him, because he's still doing it. He's still scouting players in Australia for Celtic. He is still recommending players. He's still working with youth players. There was a boy that he wanted the Celtic to have a look at, but alas, he's gone to Bayern Munich. But
must have been rubbish.
It must have been rubbish, yeah. Absolute nonsense. But he's still doing. He is imbued in football. He cannot get away from football, nor would he want to, because he's still looking at players and seeing who can play. And I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but giving something back to a profession which gave him a career and took him to the other side of the world and help him raise his children and his grandchildren. He is still looking to present the opportunity for young guys to make a living in the game, wherever they may be.
Yeah.
And you get a real feeling for that, an infection for that. Well, the other thing you started off asking, what does the book bring? I would hope from Willie's section it brings a never-ending sense of fun. The man just loves fun. He is he in the discussion with Bertie Auld the other day, Bertie kind of more or less implied that Willie's nickname was, it wasn't me. Because whatever happened, it wasn't him. And again, he was telling me yesterday that he used to kick about with Tommy Gemmell, and if there was any hijinks going on, everybody would recognise Gemmell, and nobody would recognise him. He says, I got away with murder, because if there was any trouble, Big Tam get the blame.
And he was below the radar.
What's worse? He says, what's worse? He said, Tam had a pal, and he would give out with this pal as well, and the pal would very often introduce himself as W.Wallace. So very often, if something happened, and this guy was involved and said it was W.Wallace, Steen would come in and Willie would go, listen, boss, it wasn't me, because I wasn't there. And there would be evidence to back up the fact that it wasn't Willie because he was somewhere else.
But it'd be some other guy.
Then over the rolling sausage, he says, mind you, most of the time it was me, but I just wouldn't admit it.
Very convenient. Plausible deniability. Which can come quite handy when you have Jack Steen watching over you. And watch over he did. I mean, he knew exactly what all of his players were doing at all times. He had eyes everywhere. Absolutely. You do have to be a bit clever in order to evade that sometimes. Fantastic stuff. Jim, I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much for taking so much time and chatting with us today. Let me ask you a little bit, just let's bring it back to the current day a bit, and this state that we're in, Celtic, at the moment. Well, first off, let me ask you this. I'll just throw this out of, because we're talking about the history of Celtic and sort of the context of how everything fits in. Who's the best player that's ever put on the Celtic jersey?
Oh, no pressure there, then.
You have 30 seconds.
The best player that ever put on a Celtic jersey. Technically, Jimmy.
Got to be right.
Technically, Jimmy.
Got to be.
In terms of close control, in terms of opening up a defence, in terms of going back to that thing about moving a team all over the place, Jimmy, undoubtedly. Bobby Murdoch must rate there somewhere. Jack Charlton described him as the greatest passer of the ball the game has ever seen.
Could ping a pass from 40 yards away, inch perfect, over to Jimmy.
Absolutely. You would have to throw Henrik in there as being right up with him.
Gotta be.
You would have to. When you say the best player, you see things are difficult.
Well, it's different. It's different to different people.
Well, but not only that, Graham. Alden Murdoch were the best midfield. Now, there's a great story about Leeds, 1970, when Jock Stein talks about the second leg at Hampden and says, they're very strong in the midfield. Lorimer, Bremner, Giles, Gray, and they play 4-4-2, we play 4-2-4, and Bertie goes, aye, but there's me and Bobby. Aye, and Stein says, well, should we change that to 4-4-2? Should we match them up in midfield? And Bertie says, aye, there's me and Bobby. That makes 6. She says, me and Bobby. Right. So if you say Bobby Murdoch, you're not immediately partnering with Bertie Auld.
Gotta be.
Because there's that. And players, I mean, God, you have to go back to. My dad always talked about Jimmy Delaney, or Charlie Tully, or God, Jimmy McGrory.
Jimmy McGrory, yeah. I mean, and
you'll get people who look at great players like Malcolm McDonald and Patsy Gallagher, and there are just so many. To be able to pick out somebody is the best. However, you have to say that in terms of the relatively modern era where there's footage to see the way a football works, you go to Jimmy. And I don't know if anybody's noticed this. I'm sure they have. I love the footage of Jimmy Johnson where he beats a player and the ball doesn't move. Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
he
I
moves,
love it.
The player moves and the ball hasn't. He beats a player without moving the ball, especially Big Davy Provan of Rangers. Where he does this and he shifts out the way. But equally, in terms of tactics, Jimmy could undo a defence. See that business I mentioned about pulling somebody out the way and leaving the space for the others that I mentioned? Jimmy made so much, and Willie talks about that. Well, Jimmy just made so much happen in a football park. So if you were to ask me who was the best player, all sentiment and love for the wee guy aside, who was the most effective? Jimmy, by far.
Yeah. Yeah, no question about it. That would be my choice as well. And I mean, it's always an interesting question to ask. I mean, if you're in a pub or you're just having a conversation about Celtic, because it can go in so many different directions, not just in terms of what your perspective is, what you value, in terms of when you ask who's the best player, what are the criteria that you're listing there? And it's different for everybody, and different players fit into that. But it's always a fascinating discussion, because you always talk about, the roles that players had, not just their effectiveness or how many goals they scored or how they created, but what they meant to their side, and that Lisbon Lions team, as is described by W.Wallace, that was a unit. It was a unit of sheer magic, just genius throughout, and
that is something that he stresses. He is very keen to stress that the 11 that took the field in Lisbon were no more a team, or more important a team, than John Hughes, Charlie Gallagher, Willie O'Neill, John Fallon, John Cushley. He says that we all played for one another. We all remained very, very close. We were one team. He says it wasn't as if there was anybody there who was the focus of the team, not even Jimmy. We were a team, everybody. And that is important. Going back to your question, if the question was who was the best player, that might be very different to who was the greatest player. Because the greatest player, I know that my pal Raymond would say that his favourite player of all time was Lennox, because Lennox was there forever. Bobby was there forever and playing at a hugely good level forever and a day. Danny McGrain would be the one who you would say is an automatic fit in his position. With everybody else, you might turn around and say there is an argument to say that someone else might play it outside right, maybe for his occasional brilliance, De Canio or someone of that ilk, or Moravchik could play in the middle of the field. But when you come to that position of right back, Danny McGrain beats everybody else. Always will, always did.
Consummate professional.
Absolutely. And was there forever. Still is there. And in exactly the same way, if you were to say who's the greatest Celt, John Clark has probably given Celtic more service in terms of years than anyone in history.
Yeah, no question. No question.
I always say about John Clark, if the Martians came tomorrow, if they arrived in spaceships outside Kerrydale Street and the first person they bumped into was John Clark, within an hour they'd have a Celtic scarf round their head with fans. Because John Clark would just make you a fan instantly.
And a customised jersey.
Take it to your leader. No, don't bother. You just have a scarf. Right? Hail, the Celtic.
You're going to get their picture taken next to the Big Jock statue.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I don't know. You could go back to the Melees. You could go back to God knows who. There are so many people. And what I love about the club, I love the stories about those people. I love the stories about the people who played. I love the stories about the people who support. I love the stories about the people who manage. And all the strange things that happen around Celtic. I just think it's inexplicable. I mean, the idea of, by the way, I can't go through this interview without saying something.
Finally.
Finally, no chance. Last week, there was a series of movements or a series of things that took place in the name of the Celtic Graves Society.
Yes.
Which was just astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. On the anniversary of the club's first game, to find that so many graves of former players were visited, decorated, respected, and this went throughout Scotland, it went to the States, it went. I was left in awe at the organisation and the consideration and the movement for that. And I met someone yesterday who went to their grandfather's grave and was astonished to find that flowers had already been placed there. That is just magic. And I do mean magic in the best sense of the word. It is magic. It is fairy dust stuff. It is unbelievable. And those guys cannot get enough praise for perpetuating the story of those players and those Celtic people in the manner and the dignified fashion that they do. I think it is absolutely fantastic.
I can't agree anymore. I mean, it's the testament to it is when you try. I mean, well, I'll speak from my own experience. When I try and describe to folks over here, who aren't familiar with Celtic and don't understand, the support that Celtic has worldwide and what it means to the supporters and what it represents. You describe to them what the Celtic Grave Society does. I mean, it's something. It's so foreign, in terms of the idea, in terms of the concept. They don't know what to make of it. Like people really do that, and you can't really appreciate it until you understand how much Celtic means to folks. But the look on people's face, it's like it's unbelievable. People all over the world, sought out the graves of, the not just the first 11, but Celtic players throughout, and the amazing work that the Celtic Grave Society is doing. Not just in terms of properly marking these graves and giving a memorial and a ceremony, but linking up. You hear the stories from Jim Blythe and the great work that all of the team over there are doing in terms of linking up family members who might have known that there was a connection and sometimes didn't even know. But it's almost like, when the whole process comes together, I mean, it just feels right. It's just like a coming together, and it's just it's undescribable. But to your point, it's one of the million things that set us apart.
Well, I often ask the question when I sit in the north stand and you look at the main stand, and the three words that are printed in the top of the main stand say Celtic Football Club. And I very often ask people, which of those three words do you think is the most important? And I always answer my own question by saying it's quite clearly the word club. We are a club. Mm. We happen to be called Celtic, and we play football. Mm-hmm. But first and foremost, we are a club. And when I say we, I don't mean the 11 in the park. Mm-hmm. I don't mean the people in the dugout. I don't mean the reserves in the stand. I don't mean the staff. I mean we. All of us. Mm-hmm. We, individually, are Celtic. And I don't mean that to say that we are greater than any other support or any other club or any other football team or anything like that. What was created in 1887, 1888 was a club. Something that you, should you choose, can belong to. And something that, should you choose to belong to it, will, in its magicness, in many respects, make something happen for you. It was meant to make something happen for the poor. It was meant to put food in the mouths of people who lived in a very poor area and at a very poor time. But today it works its magic in a different way. It brings people together, like the Celtic Graves position. It brings people together. It gives us a camaraderie. It creates, for those of us who by choice or by force of nature have to go and work away from Scotland or wherever you were born, you have to go somewhere else and work there and a living, you will find a Celtic club, you will find a Celtic supporters club, you will find a Celtic pub, you will find friends. When you say the word Celtic, you will find people who will want to speak to you. And I think that's a magic thing in itself, and it's not a passing thing. You're interested in football. Because the Celtic story is about much more than football. And I think that's great. And I go back to what I was about to say. Johnny Madden, the very first Celtic centre-forward, to go and become the manager of Sparta Prague for 25 years. Yeah. They have such an influence in Czechoslovakian and European football. Mm-hmm. You couldn't write that down. You couldn't go and make it up. If you were to... I have to laugh, and I'm really excited about it. I have to laugh when I read in the paper last week that Peter Mullen has gone to Hollywood and given the people in Hollywood the story of Celtic to make a film about. And that the Hollywood people are allegedly really excited about this story.
Oh, yeah.
I scream at the newspaper, which story? There's more than one. There's hundreds.
Well, if they're really going to do, a comprehensive story that's going to be all-encompassing, it's going to be a 10-hour-long film.
Yep.
No question. There's going to be about 100. You're going to need 100 marquee stars You know, everyone from Daniel Day-Lewis to George Clooney, he's gonna play me.
You better get Peter Jackson in to do it and film it over like 5 years or something like that, because it will go forever.
Gotta be, absolutely. But it's the type of film, no matter what consummation this takes, no matter what the theme or angle that they try and that they set out to bring to the big screen, it's going to be an absolute hit. I mean, the way it's being described over here, you know, by people who don't, not just, they don't know what Celtic is. They don't know what, I mean, it's soccer. It's kicking the soccer ball around, you know. I mean, that's how alien it is, but it's being described as, like, I've heard it described, it's like the Gangs of New York meets Field of Dreams. And people are like, whoa. You know, I mean, it doesn't even matter. People are excited about it. And once that happens, you can forget it. You know, I mean, the board, the PLC, Peter Lowell, I mean, they won't need to do any marketing. No. If you build it, they will come, and they surely will come if and when that movie comes out. I think it's going to happen. I'm absolutely bursting. I can't wait.
Yeah. But the great thing, of course, about it, Graham, is that they didn't build it once, built it twice.
Very true. Very true.
You know, and you know, can you imagine that? Can you imagine walking along London Road in 1887, 1888, and seeing all these people, or the second time, filling in a brick quarry? Imagine a quarry, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60 feet deep, whatever it was.
Sure.
And here's these people filling it in, you know, and people going along in the horse and cart and saying, what are they doing? Oh, they're building a football pitch. What? Who's paying them? Nobody. Or the first time, they're building a football pitch. Who's going to play there? Don't know. Do they know? No. Why are they doing it? Because people will come. Who? Don't know, but they will.
It's absolutely unbelievable.
You cannot make this story up.
No. And the only question is, what took them so long?
Yeah, exactly. Must have stopped for tea at some point.
Jim, you obviously have deep Irish roots yourself. I mean, you know, familial connection to Donegal, to Ireland. How often do you think about the Irish connection, the Irish roots of Celtic in the context of the club and your just sort of everyday support of the club? The reason why I ask, you know, you have different factions, and with, you know, we've displayed a lot of the great things that social media and the internet has offered us, you know, the connection with Celtic Graves amongst a billion other things. But there's also a lot of instantaneous debate that comes up. There's certain people say, oh, it's just football. You know, there shouldn't be anything, you know, directly connected with Ireland. It's not an Irish team. It's a Scottish team. You have people on the flip side who don't really even care about, you know, the footballing aspect. It's just, you know, what it represents and you know, the club itself and the ideas and the philosophy and the ethos and the connection to Ireland. And then you have a lot of folks who are in between. How do you identify that personally? How much is the Irish connection a part of your supporting Celtic?
Well, I obviously have a connection to Ireland through my father. My father's Irish. My grandparents were Irish. However, if I were asked to describe myself, I would say I'm either an Irish Scot or a Scot Irish, because I feel very much part of Scotland. Scotland's my home. It's always been home.
Sure.
Yeah, I love going to Ireland. I love going to any part of Ireland, but I particularly love going back to Donegal. I don't get very often, I have to be honest, which is my fault. But when it comes to Celtic, there are a couple of things about that. First, there is the fact that you cannot ignore that at the relevant time, there were a huge number of people coming from Ireland into the west of Scotland because they were looking for what I describe as the better tomorrow. Now, I keep going back to the idea of immigration at that time, in the sense that it meant that you were leaving everything you knew behind. All that you had as security. You had to bundle up everything you have, come to this other land, and hopefully find something better. Now, many people went to America, whatever lots came to Scotland. It just so happened at the time that the vast majority, or the big majority that came into Glasgow, into the west of Scotland at the time, were Irish. And they were looking for something. It was identified that they needed, going back to that word club, they needed something to focus on, to give them a social outlet, if you like, because there were hard times. And to a certain extent, there were understandable concerns about what this mass number of people would mean for the local community. However, I like to think of Celtic as literally the club of immigrants. And I don't just mean Irish immigrants, and I don't just mean going back to 1887 and 1888. The very purpose of Celtic was that everybody was welcome here. That meant whether you were an Irish immigrant, or you were a seventh-generation Glaswegian, or you were an Italian, or an Indian, or a Pakistani, or an Israeli, or you came from the Hebrides. People often forget that people who emigrated from the Hebrides and came to Glasgow, they were as far away in terms of time and space and the ability to get back in 1880 and 1870 and 1890 from the Hebrides as they were from America. The folk singer Dougie MacLean writes great songs about the fact that if you came down from the islands, you were suddenly in the second city of the empire, which was a different world to where you were brought up, of what you knew.
Sure.
And the whole purpose of Celtic to this day, to my mind, is everybody and anybody is welcome. I'll tell you a story. A few years ago, I was going to Celtic Park on a European night, and I phoned a guy that I did some work with who is an Indian. And he was speaking on the phone, and I said, look, I'm going to Celtic Park, I'm going to the game, I can't be on for long. And he quickly interrupted me and said, I know, I have to get in front of the telly with a bottle of red wine. And I said, why? And he said, oh, superstitious. Unless I've got my red wine in front of the telly, they'll lose. and I said to him, wait a minute, you're a Rangers fan? And he said, well, no, I was. I said, go on. And I'd known the guy for years. This was the complete revelation to me. And he said he had been a Rangers fan, grew up in the Souness era and all the success and all the money that Rangers had. And naturally he followed the successful team at the time.
Sure.
And he was going to visit, he was going to go and watch an Old Firm game. He found himself in a slightly different part of the town he stayed in, and rather than be late for the game, he stuck his Rangers scarf in the boot and walked into a Celtic pub, where he met a couple of people that he kind of knew. And he went through the game with them, and he hoped that Rangers won. It turned out to be a nothing draw, but he had a pretty pleasant time in the pub. When it came to the next Old Firm game, using that term in its worst sense, he found himself in the same pub, and Celtic scored. And he said the reaction when Celtic scored was very different to what I was used to. And this process continued, and I don't want, let me stress that there are very many very, very good Rangers fans. I don't want to in any way castigate what I'm about to say. I'm going to a whole generation of people, a whole group of people, what I'm about to say. But he found that the Celtic fans spoke to him directly. Whereas, in another place, possibly because of the colour of his skin or whatever, or his background, he was referred to in the third person. He was not spoken to directly. And he became a Celtic fan because the fans took him in much more than Rangers fans did. Now, don't get me wrong, I stress again, there will be other Rangers fans who would not have reacted that way. But the people that he knew and had been kicking about with, he realised he was treated differently, the Celtic fans.
And the important point in that is that that scenario that you describe, I respect the fact that you want to put a disclaimer that not all Rangers fans are going to be like that, but there's no possibility that he would ever have that experience amongst Celtic supporters, and that's what he experienced.
I've mentioned the colour thing, but I stress it wasn't just about that. He said the atmosphere, the way the team was supported. And I'm not saying for a minute that it's different to all clubs, that it's better than all clubs, that it's even better than Rangers. It just appealed to him. He became a Celtic fan, not because of the team in the park, which was why he followed Rangers, because Souness was buying up great players and stuff like that. He became a fan because of the support. The ordinary Joe in the pub, the ordinary guy. The experience was pleasant. It was funny. He was welcomed in. He was bought a drink. He could buy a drink back. He just said it was different. And I've always found that story unbelievably interesting. How somebody who has got no agenda and who's got no baggage of the problem that we suffer in the west of Scotland, who was just a guy that supported Rangers, found that he would rather support another club because of the people who support that club. So you ask how important it is that the Irish connection is involved. The connection is not so much that the people concerned were Irish, it is the fact that they came together. They came together to support a club that was created, if you like, for them to come and support. Whoever wants to come and support this club can come and support it. And when you support it in a way which makes you proud to support it, which makes the club proud that you do support it. Support it in a way that makes Henrik Larsson run further, jump higher, go faster. And the Celtic support, for whatever arguments there may be within that support, whatever argument there might be about what the board do, what the board don't do, who we should sign, who we shouldn't sign, how we should play, how we shouldn't play. The Celtic support in a way, when at their very, very best, they are absolutely unmatchable. Socially and as a support.
It's the unmovable, undeniable concept of us. You know, when you're a supporter and you talk about the support, it's always us. You know, we are together, and that whole Celtic family moniker has been done to death on Twitter and elsewhere. But it truly is a family, like you described. I mean, I've experienced it. You travel all around the world, and I never get on an airplane without a Celtic top, because you always know that you're going to be in good hands no matter where you land. It's that sort of communal, familial relationship that we all have, that Tommy Burns described, and the way that we support the club and support each other. It's Tommy Burns described that, you know, we're here and we're always here and we're always going to be here. That's what's going to keep us from going down the road that the now deceased Rangers went. You know,
in 2006, I went to the World Cup in Germany, in Munich, for the Australia-Brazil game, and I went out in the Sunday morning, early doors on the Sunday morning. I had a walk around Munich, and I was wearing a Celtic t-shirt, and everything was closed. It was about 7:30 in the morning, and everything was closed, and I was conscious of the fact that, to be quite frank, I was being followed, and I eventually realised it was quite a big group of people that were following me. And when I turned round, they were all Japanese. And of course, we had Nakamura played at the time. And they saw the crest, Celtic, Nakamura,
right.
Shunsuke Nakamura, did it, photo. And like, I kept getting my photographs taken with these people. And later on in the day, going to the game, there was 4 of us there. My friend had asked me would I be wearing a Brazil shirt or an Australia shirt. And I said, neither. I'm going to wear the hoops. And I wore a signed Henrik Larsson shirt. And 2006 was the year that Barcelona beat Arsenal.
Wow.
in the Champions League final.
Right.
And I went about Munich that day, and I could not pay for anything. People say I don't pay for anything anyway, but I couldn't pay for anything in any bar I went into. The Australian fans in the main were Celtic fans, so everywhere I went I was getting hail, hail, monahoops, hail, hail. The Brazilians were Barcelona fans more or less to a man.
Sure.
Because of Ronaldinho and whatever. And at one point there, Conga stopped in front of me and they're all shouting Larsson. All the England fans that were there, who weren't Arsenal fans, just saw the Larsson jersey and, you know, kind of went spare about it. I could not, from dawn till dusk, I could not, if I went to a bar and proffered money for the round of drinks that I'd ordered for people, I was told somebody's taking care of that, because I wore that shirt. And with no trouble, with nobody coming up, I was accosted in the street by 2 Hearts fans who sang loudly at me, Hearts, glorious Hearts, Hearts.
You go all the way to Munich and you run into Jambos.
Yeah, and they were great guys. But the camaraderie that came about because I wore that shirt and I was offered money for it. I was offered something else for it, but I'm not going to say what it was. But you know, it was. You wear that shirt in Europe, and you will have people come and speak to you. It's just never not happened that way. Mm-hmm. And so whether you're Irish or whether you're Japanese or an Indian or whatever, the shirt and what the shirt has come to represent 125 years later speaks volumes. Andrea Pirlo said last year that he always welcomed Celtic in the later stages of Europe because of what the club represent, and he didn't mean the players.
Right. Right, and you hear it so many times. I mean, not just Pirlo, Seedorf. You know, obviously his very often quoted a phrase. You know, just praising the Celtic support. We've heard Xavi, Messi, and Iniesta when they came last fall, and even the manager of Helsinki last year. You know, talked about everything that's good with football. You know, the reason why football will continue to live on is because of supporters like Celtic. You know, I'm obviously paraphrasing, but it speaks volumes to your point that no matter where you go, what we do represents the club and it's beloved everywhere, not just amongst the supporters themselves, but folks who have been exposed to to our being, to the way that we are and there's so much to like, especially in a world where you're dealing with just awful issues, of violence, hooliganism, racism, etc. I mean, Celtic is a beacon of light, in the middle of that.
Well, I was at a meeting at Celtic Park over 18 months ago, and I was given an amazing statistic. Celtic themselves, the PLC, reckon that 95% of Celtic supporters and followers have never been inside Celtic Park once. That's their statistic, not mine.
Yeah.
Now, with my business head on, if you can tap into that, forget the idea of television money for a minute. Television money follows. Television money shouldn't lead. And I listened to the guy from Cardiff saying the other week, Cardiff City will get 60 million quid for playing in the EPL. Very good, but they'll spend it all on wages.
Right.
I mean, they're not going to be richer for getting into the EPL. The only way they'll be richer is if they go in and go straight back down and collect another 60 million going down and don't change the playing style and change rota. Mm-hmm. They are not richer by the television money. But if we have 95% of followers, which some would grow in terms of numbers, if you sign someone from Japan or from South Korea or any of the emergent footballing nations in Asia, because they follow the player.
America.
Yeah, America. I forgot about America. Right. But basically, if you can tap into that market and you can get that 95% to buy a scarf or a shirt or donate £1 or do anything in any way which supports the club financially, then to be quite frank, you create a completely different business beast. Now, Manchester United have lots of markets sewn up, and they've done it a certain way. They obviously have the benefit of the EPL television money, etc., etc., etc. But Manchester United do not have the growth potential that Celtic Football Club has in business terms. And no other club, I believe, has the growth potential that Celtic Football Club has in financial terms.
And the financial footing. I mean, look at the debt load that Manchester United, as well as some of the other clubs that are talked about as the Goliaths. I mean, the amount of debt they have is absolutely, I mean, it takes your breath away, and the fact that we have zero debt, effectively. And to your point, I mean, the sky's the limit. In terms of growth potential and tapping we're talking about it in a business perspective. It's not romantic, but it is reality. Tapping into the resources that are, the Australian community, the American community. When I met with Peter Lawwell last year, I just said, this is me on behalf of all of the Celtic supporters here that sound like me, that aren't expats, that aren't, just sort of transient. We are from here. We sound just like I do. We are mental. This is my hand. We want to support the club. We want to give you our money, but we need you to make it easier for us. Because the opportunity is here.
Yeah, but Graham, let me just say, romance sells. Romance sells hugely, and you will scour one end of this earth to another to find a football club that is more romantic than Celtic Football Club.
No question about it.
From its very outset to the stories of the people that are involved in it, even the Henrik story. Henrik was sitting in Rotterdam and was talking about going back to Sweden.
Yeah.
And look what happened to him. And I'm not saying that it happened to him just because he came to Celtic Park where I believe magic things happen. But Henrik Larsson has said himself, that's where I became a player. That's where my entire persona and abilities changed. And so there is that part to sell in a global footballing structure. But at the same time, if you look at how commercialised the Champions League has become, sponsored by MasterCard or God knows whoever, I believe in the green pound. I believe that if we go in numbers anywhere and you see the Celtic shirt and you see the Celtic fans spend and you see the Celtic support come. See, after Seville, I remember going to Barcelona after Seville in the 2004 season, and the estimation was it was 10 or 12,000 going to go to Barcelona and they would do this, that and the next. There were miles more, many, many more in Barcelona that season. And you could see the people of Barcelona welcome you with open arms because they knew the financial benefit that Seville got as a result of that mass invasion of Celtic supporters. And times are hard. We're in a recession. There's recession everywhere.
Yeah.
But especially in recession, especially in Spain, especially in Italy.
Yeah.
I know that there are many people who live in the areas around where the big football clubs are, and they want Celtic out the hat because of the support. The support means money.
Oh, no question. That is a boost to the economy. The airlines, the barkeepers, the hotels, everybody wants Celtic. Because we will be there.
They want us because we will be there, and we will be there in a way that everybody wants us there.
Exactly.
And that goes back to Lisbon. It had never been done before.
Yeah.
And we continue to break records in that respect. And don't get me wrong, it's not about records. It's about the way you feel in your heart. Couldn't care less if you were the biggest or the boldest or the whatever. It's just, do you want to go and do you want to have a party? Because that's what it is. It's a party. It's a party from start to finish. No
question. Jim, thank you so much. For joining us today, spending so much time. Really appreciate it. Obviously on a weekend. I enjoyed it so much. Just hearing your passion for Celtic and your description, not just of the book, but of your interaction with W.Wallace. And I think this gives us a good insight into sort of the tone and the warmth that's going to come through with this book. You can check it out. I just retweeted a link, and I'm going to continue to tweet the link. Heart of a Lion. It's the W.Wallace autobiography. Jim, one more question, and then I'll let you get back to your Sunday. I know that I'm sure there's a billion other things that you'd probably rather be doing, but
they're called dishes.
I know the feeling.
If you want to talk here till 4:00 this afternoon, it's fine.
Fantastic. I have some dishes of my own. We'll just leave it at that. One last question though, and getting back to the here and now, The team at the moment, we're going through a bit of a transitory period. I mean, obviously some players it's more than rumored. We're going to see some players leave this summer, and it might be multiple very influential players going out the door, probably and hopefully, and can't see a scenario where we wouldn't replenish, where we wouldn't bring in new players. There's also some uncertainty about the manager. Obviously, these rumors, they come up on Twitter and the message boards, and then obviously the mainstream media doesn't need an excuse to rile things up. But nonetheless, we are going to have something of a jarring of the character, the theme of this side. Some of the nucleus is going to leave. Are you hopeful or are you nervous looking forward? I mean, we have a huge and absolutely colossal job to do in terms of trying to get back to that group stage again. I mean, we talk about the result against Barcelona and making it to the last 16, but let's not forget that we had an absolutely phenomenal qualifying run just to get into the group stages. We're going to have to do that same thing again, probably with some new faces coming in. They're going to have to be very effective very, very early on. What are your thoughts? Are you hopeful looking not just into next season, but the future in general? Are you nervous at all? What's your sort of sense? I know you sort of, you very declaratively answered this in the opening. You're always positive. You always think that Celtic is going to beat everybody that they come up against, but you know what I mean in the context of the interchanging parts. What's your feeling at this point?
Honestly, without any romantic notion or whatever at all, we can't lose. We can't lose if players go out the door. We can't lose if players stay. If Wanyama and Hooper or Foster or anybody else leaves Celtic for X million or whatever amount of money is concerned, and if they go to England or they go to Italy or they go somewhere else, then what you're effectively saying to all the young guys out there who think they have talent, have the dedication and have the desire and the drive to make it in football, is that if you come to this club, if you go to this club in Glasgow, whether you're an African or an Asian or whether you're from Rothsay or wherever you're from, if you come to Celtic Park and you apply yourself and your ultimate goal is to move on somewhere else, then Celtic Football Park is the perfect platform to do that from. So if we lose the nucleus of our team, which I don't think we will, by the way, if we lose, you're only losing temporarily. You may well gain an influx of other talent and you will gain a reputation which will do the club no harm going forward. Now, that being said, the most important part for me is that we retain the services of John Park and his staff.
Yes. Because
they have unearthed the Wanyamas and the Fosters. And don't get me wrong, Lenny's been a part of that. It was Lenny who saw Hooper at Scunthorpe. Alan Thompson with Big Fraser.
Forster, yeah.
But at the same time, we have to make sure that what we have at the forefront of our footballing section is the ability to bring in talent at a reasonable price and bring them on. Much like what I said about Willie Wallace and his 14 at Dumbarton. If we get the reputation of being a stepping stone for real top talent, that is no bad thing.
Well, in addition to not getting in the way of some of this brilliant young talent that we have at Lennoxtown just now, which is, in my opinion, that's what gives me the peace of mind. If all else fails, we have players like Tony Watt. Atajic looks an absolutely cracking player. We have Twardzik, who everybody has seemingly forgot about, but he's only going to get better. Dylan McGeoch looks like a tidy player. I mean, there's so many positives.
Well, yes, you've got them coming through, and you've got the youth set up under Stevie Frail, which is producing that talent. However, equally important, Graham, is people like Giorgio Samaras. Because Samaras, again, if you read anything about Samaras apparently likes it here. He gets the club.
Yeah.
He gets the ethos of the club.
You can tell.
He gets the notion, and go back to that EGM 2 years ago when Lenny was asked why give this guy a contract, he'll get you the sack. And he said, no, well, we see something. Now, Samaras has made it quite plain, as I understand it, that he does not want to leave. Talk to the likes of Willie Wallace, and you'll talk to some people who will say it is important for a player to be a player in the dressing room as much as it is out in the pitch. You have to have a leader in the dressing room. Here's what this is about. Here is what is achievable. Equally, and it's often forgotten, I think, the role of Scott Brown. Scott Brown has now been at Celtic for 7 or 8 years. I can't remember how long. He has the opportunity to go anywhere else that he so chooses. He chooses not. He is, in every sense of the word, the club captain.
And it's a lad from Fife who was not a Celtic supporter. I mean, let's be honest, when he came here.
He is there to be the living example of anybody from Scotland or the British Isles or anywhere else, as you say, who is not a Celtic fan, who's come in. He will be set for life. He may have been richer had he moved on to somewhere else. But as Willie will tell you, if you are the club captain of Celtic Football Club, if you have been there for a number of years, you don't have that job for 5 years or 6 years or 7 years. You've got it for life. You will be invited to here, there and everywhere. Business opportunities are presented to you because you were at Celtic Park. You were the captain of Celtic. So I go back. Am I fearful? No, I'm not fearful. I'm not even fearful if for some reason somebody comes along and says, here's X amount of money and persuades Neil Lennon to go elsewhere. One, I don't think Neil Lennon wants to go anywhere else. I think he could be tempted. I think it is inevitable that one day he will. I don't think it will be now. But the fact of the matter is that I think I have enough faith in the structure of the club that has emerged so far and will emerge and is emerging, that they will bring people in who can continue this business model that has been put in place so far. And if we lose young talent, then there will be other talent. And more importantly, there will be agents of that talent. People with a certain degree of business savvy who will want to bring players to Celtic because they will know that this is a stepping stone.
Oh, the precedent's there, no question.
Absolutely. At the same time, who would want to leave? Who would want to leave and why? Now you look at Wanyama. Wanyama could be a world superstar in the making.
I agree.
He could do worse than be shown a whole load of videos of Liam Miller. He could do worse than, no disrespect to him now, see the early videos of Sean Maloney.
Right.
Because unless you stay and you learn your trade in any job, in any profession, in any environment, you will not always fulfill your potential. You will go somewhere perhaps where the competition for places is greater, where there is more money to bring in an immediate replacement.
Oh, the money will always be there.
If you learn your trade, you will ultimately get to your destination. So if I were advising Victor Wanyama, let's imagine for a minute I'm not a Celtic fan, but I'm an agent and I'm entitled to X% of whatever ultimate fee there is. I could have X% of 10 million tomorrow, but I could have X% of 25 million in 18 months' time or a year's time or whatever it is. Right. If I'm looking after a business interest, what is best here? Is Wanyama going to go to the dogs at Celtic Park? Is he going to stultify there? I don't think so. Not yet.
Well, and if he leaves too soon, you're looking at, if he leaves too soon and he's not effective wherever he lands, you're looking at one deal and one deal only, because he's not going to move on for big money after that. You need to make sure that the player is going to be ready so that they can step into wherever they're going, and then obviously set up the possibility of another big money move after that. There's not enough long-term thinking, I think, in society in general, but that would serve football agents well as well. Resisting the urge to chase the quick buck, but yes, it is. I mean, think about the amount of money. It is alluring, but when you look at the overall big picture, what's best for everybody is exactly what you're describing: waiting until the player is ready, and then going and ensuring that they're going to have success wherever it is that they land. The point that you bring up about why players leave, who would leave and why, I mean, that's the integral part of this, especially when we're talking about players like Gary Hooper, Gary Hooper's not a Celtic fan. Let's be honest. He comes from Essex. He was knocked back by Spurs at a very young age. He's got a chip on his shoulder, and I absolutely love that. I want players that are hungry, that have the hunger to go out and prove a point. Victor Wanyama, obviously coming from the Belgian league, grew up as a United supporter, as so many people around the world do with all the exposure. But he's constantly proving a point. But the thing that I appreciate and really respect and admire about Wanyama is, his comments, you don't see comments in the Daily Record or the other what I would refer to as red tops. You don't see his words getting twisted. Sometimes a player will make a comment. Charlie Mulgrew has absolutely made a living out of it. Saying things and then it gets twisted and it's not exactly what he meant. With Wanyama, what you see is what you get. They ask him a question. I love it here at Celtic. It's something special that I'm being part of. You get the sense that once he got here, he understands and he sees the big picture.
Absolutely, but equally now. This is, if you like, a romantic notion, but at the same time, it's not a romantic notion. It's just a difference in the culture. Go back to Willie and Bertie. I know it's 40 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever it is, but I think the question is one I'm about to pose is one that is not asked, or it is not asked often enough, and it should be asked. Are you having fun? Mm. Are you enjoying this? Mm-hmm. Because see if it is the case that you are being paid, and we often talk about player salaries and weekly numbers. Let's talk about it in yearly numbers. Are you being paid £2 million a year to have fun? Because see if you are you prepared to go somewhere to be paid £3 million a year that might not be fun?
Right.
Now, players are surrounded by agents and advisors. Trust me, see if you're earning £2 million a year for 4 years on a contract. Your 8 proper agents and advisors should be able to take your money and invest it for you, and in turn make you very, very, very comfortable for the rest of your life. You and I don't get £2 million a year. I'll happily sign up for the job when I do. But, the situation is that if you're a Celtic player, and I mean, there's people going to Las Vegas next week for the Las Vegas convention.
Yes.
And going out, Bertie's going out, arm twisted up his back as usual. Dixie Deans, Frank McGarvey, George McCluskey. I think Tom Boyd's going because Tom Boyd goes to everything.
Sure.
These are people who are engaged with a Celtic support, and as I said, they're not engaged for the 4 or 5 years that they're there. They're engaged for life. Mm-hmm. And if you, over the course of a career, I mean, I don't know, it's not my place to ask even how much money Scott Brown has made as a result of being a Celtic player, but I suspect that he need not work again.
Oh, no question.
But the position is that if his money is looked after, the opportunities that come post-playing career with Celtic are endless because you're associated with that club. And a completely different topic, I've often wondered why the club, going back to something you and I talked about earlier about merchandising and all around the world, I've often wondered why the club don't get a group of players who are 35, 36, come to the end of their career and said, we want you to actually be playing ambassadors for the club. And we'll pay you £100,000 a year, right, to continue to train, but we'll take you out to the States to play 4 games, or take you to Australia, or take you to Japan, and play exhibition games against somebody, almost like the master stuff you get in tennis. Mm-hmm. The old guys, or the guys you get in golf after 50. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we'd have to be younger as footballers.
Right. Still
because footballers stop and they go, well, what am I going to do for a living now?
Right.
Now, see if you were to take a squad of 16, 17 former Celtic players and play regular games, you would promote the club non-stop.
Oh, no question about it.
All you guys in America would turn out in droves to see that.
Of course.
And I don't get that because nobody, if you're a professional athlete, and let me stress I was never a professional athlete, basically, you don't want to stop training. You look at John Collins. John Collins is as fit as a butcher's dog. But why not tap into that? Why not, as an exercise, take those people and they're not playing for the club. You can get them to go and do it. Bobby Pether still plays, for example. Yeah. Why not put them out in the name of Celtic? You would make money from doing that.
It's a brilliant idea.
Says me sitting looking out my window at the garage Well, Peter Law's counting 5 or somewhere, you know.
That's right. You know what? Things will all come into place when we are finally put in charge.
Oh, when I'm finally put in charge.
Everything will fall into place. Everything will be sorted.
And God help us all if I'm put in charge of anything. I'm not worried about if players come and go. I'm not. I would prefer Neil to stay because he is. I think he's done fantastically, absolutely fantastically.
I have to agree.
And he's a football man. And do you know something? You asked about great players earlier on, and one of the things that's often talked about, Bobby Murdoch was always played with the ball in front of him, so that he could see the game. And Neil Lennon plays football that way. He played football with the ball in front of him, and I think he understands the pattern of the game. I think you can see that. And at times, I dare say, people disagree with his decisions and his tactics or whatever. But I think that Lenny gets the leeway at Celtic Park to play the game his way. If you go to Wigan, or because that job is now available, or you go to somewhere else like that, there might be more money. But because of the financial pressures to get into the EPL or stay in the EPL or whatever, will you be allowed to play the game your way?
And will you have any sort of stability to not just play the game your way, whether you're an idealist or a pragmatist? I mean, in the era of managers coming in and out over the course of mere months, he's a fixture. He's set in stone at Celtic, for as long as he wants it, in my opinion. I mean, if this run keeps up, I think that he understands the meaning, the context of having an extended run of success as Celtic manager. We've seen it in a couple of situations over the past decade, Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan, but albeit with shorter time spans. I mean, if he could extend that, and of course the opportunity is there with this upstart Sevco that who even knows if they're going to exist in 1 year, 2 years time. There's a tremendous opportunity to really, I mean, he's cutting his teeth, so to speak, playing against the best teams in the world, and he's adapted brilliantly.
I think there's also a lesson to be learned from England. The most successful club manager in England was in the one job for 20-something years. Wenger, for the successes he's had, and by the way, Arsenal are not my team by any manner of means, but Arsenal will make a return to the very top echelons of English football when the people that control the club stop salting the money away, because they're actually making a lot of money. But
no question.
They're not doing the right thing with it in terms of the football.
People call the Emirates a library. I call it a bank.
Yeah. Well, Wenger has been there a long time. Davy Moyes was there a long time at Everton. Now, the clubs that have chopped and changed are the ones that go up and down like yo-yos. Neil Lennon has an opportunity to play in 2 leagues. There is the Scottish League. We know about that. But at the same time, you have the opportunity, if you have the right staff, the right calibre of player, to repeat what happens in Europe. Now, let's face it, Benfica, who we defeated in the group stages of the Champions League, reached the final of the Europa League. Had Celtic gone out in the Champions League stages and got into the final of the Europa League, we would have hailed that as a success. We would all have piled over there.
I'd have been in Amsterdam.
Absolutely. We'd invaded the place, all lock, stock and barrel. That wouldn't have measured as failure for me. That would have measured as success.
No question.
And the point I'm getting at is that Neil is in charge of a team which has the capability in one or t'other of the main European competitions to actually go and test himself in a league which is out with Scotland, or against competition which is out with Scotland. He still has to maintain the challenge against teams which have improved greatly this year, such as Motherwell and Inverness and St Johnstone and the likes. But you have the opportunity at this point in time to bring in the young talent that we've talked about and to play against very good European opposition and play in Scotland. I think that's a great challenge for any manager, especially one that's a supporter of the club.
No question about it. A supporter of the club that understands, the context and the history of the club and the opportunity that he has to I mean, just not just to put his stamp on Celtic history, but to take the club to its rightful place as a European power once again.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us as fans, the more we're drawn in the hat against anyone from Europe, the more we've got the opportunity to go and convert them to being Celtic fans. That's the whole ethos of the thing. Go somewhere, give a T-shirt or a scarf or something to a waiter, turn them into a Celtic fan. Mm-hmm. There are loads of people who do that.
Yep. And that's
so. I'm not fearful. The players are footballers. They're young men. There's also temptations come their way. They can move on if they want. We will still be here, and I think we are building now a platform whereby we are an attraction to very good young footballers. We are a place where, for a period of time at least, they will want to come. And equally, we're also a club which I think will attract people who are perhaps just past the peak of their career, should they choose to come. Because I think there is an opportunity there. If we want to take that. Has to be the right kind of player, right enough, not somebody who's just turning up for the money.
Right.
They have to come and want to play in front of a passionate support. And of course, play at a club whose outward facade will change over the next 4 or 5 years, because once the Celtic Triangle is developed and the opportunities from that swing into play, then, we look like a different club, we feel like a different club. After the Commonwealth Games, and given what's going on in the East End of Glasgow, we will be a different club in terms of the physicality of the club, in terms of what the stadium looks like in the surrounding areas of the stadium. So there's an awful lot positive happening at Celtic Park, and one or two people going, do you know what, that's just the price you pay.
Yep. Yeah, it has to happen. I mean, you have to have just sort of a refreshing. If Gary Hooper wants more money and we can't provide him, if he wants a new challenge and we can't provide that, he needs to go, because languishing sort of on the vine is not going to be the best scenario for either party in this. But we will bring in someone, or we may already have that someone that's going to step in and continue the charge forward, and it will be just fine. I agree completely, and it was very well said. In how you frame that. Jim, thank you so much, for joining us today. Can I tell you just how much I enjoyed it? And hopefully we can call on you again. You can come back and we can talk more about the book and more about, what you're involved with. I mean, obviously go to Celtic Quick News, and, you are Brogan, Rogan, Trevino, and Hogan. And yes, we can find you on Twitter as well. Yes, I'm there most days. Fantastic. Well, I'll send out a tweet with your Twitter information. You heard it, folks. I mean, right there. The content that he puts out on Celtic Quick News and elsewhere is absolutely top drawer. Heart of a Lion, Willie Wallace autobiography. The man himself, a huge contributor to that, and we look forward to reading that. And we look forward to catching up with you soon, pal. We'll let you get back with your Sunday, but okay. Thank you so much again, Jim. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Graham. The main reason for buying the book, Willie's a nice guy. That's reason enough. Cheers. Okay. Cheers, pal. Cheers. No problem. Bye. Oof, man, that was an absolute treat. I hope that you, the listeners, enjoyed that half as much as I did, because I think we're gonna have some pretty satisfied folks out there. What a gentleman! So much insight and so much passion. It really comes through, and I'm eager to pick up a copy of Heart of a Lion, the Willie Wallace autobiography. Check it out. It's on Celtic Quick News. I'm going to retweet a link to it, but it's out there and it's about. Definitely check that out. And Brogan, Rogan, Trevino, and Hogan. What a treat! I was looking forward to this for quite some time, and hoping that at some point we could have a chat with him, and it was certainly well worth it, and it exceeded even my already high expectations. So phenomenal stuff. Thanks again to Jim. Want to give a shout out to first. We referenced the Las Vegas convention. The convention for the North American Federation of Celtic Supporters Clubs is coming up this week. You can follow all the action on Twitter at NAF, as in Frank, CSC. So it's the North American Federation of Celtic Supporters Clubs, under the Fed, on Twitter. So check them out. Definitely give them a follow. Also want to give a shout out again to the Celtic Grave Society, the fantastic work that they're doing over there. Definitely worth a follow on Twitter at Celtic Graves. And of course, the fantastic Kano Foundation, what they're doing in terms of bringing the Celtic experience to underprivileged kids, young boys and girls who don't have the resources, to get out and to experience, what it's like to be at Celtic Park, and to support Celtic, giving them the opportunity to see the game, to see the park, to see the players. It's extraordinary work that they're doing. Follow them at Kano Foundation on Twitter. And if you go to the website, thekanofoundation.com, they have fantastic pins for sale that I'm sort of a badge. I just call them pins. Badges, from the Kano Foundation. Definitely a hot commodity. I'm a bit of a badge geek, and they have a very prominent place on my scarf where I display my badges. So check them out, make a donation, and get a fantastic badge in the process. Really just helps all parties involved. So that's pretty much it for this week. It's 8:30, and now I need to shower and get ready. I'm going to the USA-Germany game, international friendly here in Washington, D.C. I need to have my head examined and pray that my wife is not going to leave me, because I'm sure that I woke her up at 5:30. Thank you so much for listening in. Obviously, close season, but we're going to try and get as much content in here, interviews like we just had, because I have so much fun in doing it, and I think that everybody enjoys it as well. So as long as that's the case, we'll try and fill it in with some content to get over these close season blues and make heads or tails of the transfer window, silliness and all that. And don't forget to check out the Lost Boys. They're going to have a bit of an anthology, a series of podcasts that are going to encompass many of the members of Hail Hail Media and elsewhere. So definitely keep an eye out for that. You can follow us on Twitter at BTW Celtics Show. And my name is Graham Wilson. Taking us out, as always, is Shane McGowan and the Pogues. And I'm going to tiptoe back upstairs and try and get in the shower. But everybody have a great rest of your Sunday, great rest of your weekend. Hail, hail, and keep the faith. We'll talk to you soon.
The island, it is silent now, but the ghosts still haunt the waves. And a torch lights up a famished man who fortune could not save. Did you work upon the railroads? Did you ride the streets of crime? Were your dollars from the White House? Were they from the 5 and dime? Did the old songs start to cheer you, and did they still make you cry? Did you count the months and years, or did your teardrops quickly dry? I know that it was not to be on a copping ship. I came here and I never even got so far that they could change my name. Thousands are sailing across the western ocean to a land of opportunity that some of them will never see. Fortune prevailing across the western ocean, their bellies full, their spirits free. They'll break the chains of poverty and they'll dance. In Manhattan's desert twilight, in the dead of afternoon, we stepped hand in hand on Broadway like the first man on the moon. And a blackbird broke the silence as he whistled, it's so sweet. And then Brendan Behan's footsteps, I danced up and down the street. And we said goodnight to Broadway, giving it our best regards. Tipped our hats to Mr. Cohen, dear old Times Square's favourite bird. Then we raised a glass to JF